All right, let's dive right into this explainer and absolutely master layout versus schematic, ensuring you walk away with the ultimate interview-ready answers and some incredibly practical real-world debugging techniques. Whether you're navigating your very first integrated circuit design or you're a seasoned engineer trying to streamline that analog layout workflow, LVS is literally the ultimate gatekeeper. But honestly, it's more than just a gatekeeper. It's like a giant puzzle that analog engineers have to solve to prove their silicon will actually work. By the end of our time together today, you won't just understand what LVS is, you're going to know exactly how it thinks, how to troubleshoot it systematically without losing your mind, and exactly how to articulate its nuances perfectly in a professional setting. Let's get into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. What is LVS? 2. Real-world analogies. 3. The internal LVS process. 4. DRC versus LVS. 5. Common failures. And finally, 6. LVS debugging techniques.
Section 1. What is LVS? And Section 2. Real-world analogies. So to really grasp this, especially if you're new to VLSI design, let's look at a couple of everyday scenarios. It's one thing to talk about polygons and transistors, but framing this in a real-world context makes the whole thing just click. Your schematic is basically the blueprint, or let's say your pizza order. The layout, that's the actual constructed house or the physical pizza delivered right to your door. Imagine handing a civil engineer a flawless house plan where the master bedroom connects to the hallway, but when they actually build the thing, they accidentally construct the bedroom so it opens directly into the bathroom. Now, the house might look structurally beautiful, it might even pass all the city safety codes, but it completely fails the plan. Or think about ordering a pizza. You clearly specify no olives. That's your schematic intent. The physical pizza arrives, it looks delicious, perfectly baked, but it's covered in olives. That is your layout. The physical object exists, it's totally valid as a pizza, but it failed your specification. In silicon design, accidentally adding an extra ingredient like a stray polygon of metal or a misplaced piece of poly completely changes the final product. That, my friends, is a classic LVS failure.
Moving on to Section 3, the internal LVS process.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how the EDA tools actually perform this comparison under the hood. They aren't just looking at pictures and playing some high-tech game of spot the difference. No way. They're essentially reverse engineering your entire layout. LVS relies entirely on the netlist. It compares the schematics netlist against an extracted netlist built from your physical layers, stuff like NWEL, poly, and metal. So what is a netlist? It's exactly what it sounds like, a text-based list of nets and devices. It basically says, hey, I have a PMOS transistor right here, its source is connected to VDD, its gate is at the input, and its drain is at the output. Now, the schematic naturally has a netlist because, well, that's how you drew it. The real magic of LVS is forcing the physical layout to generate its own netlist to prove it matches. To do this, it uses a rule deck, which is this massive file of geometric and Boolean logic instructions. This tech tells the extraction tool, listen, anytime a strip of polysilicon directly crosses over an active diffusion layer, you officially have a transistor. By combining thousands of these geometric rules, the tool builds a complete electrical map out of pure dumb shapes.
Let's break down exactly how this builds step by step. First, the tool generates the schematic netlist. Second, it runs the layout extraction. Third, it builds the layout netlist. And fourth, it runs a heavy-duty comparison engine between the two. In step 2, the layout extraction, the tool is basically acting like a detective, mapping out every single wire based on those rule decks we just talked about. But steps 3 and 4, that is where the heavy lifting actually happens. Generating the layout netlist and running that comparison engine isn't just about reading a text file line by line. The EDA tool actually builds 2 massive mathematical graphs, one for your schematic, one for your layout. In these graphs, every transistor is a node, and every wire is an edge connecting them. It then performs an incredibly complex mathematical operation called graph isomorphism. It literally tries to fold and map the layout graph perfectly onto the schematic graph to see if they are mathematically identical in every possible way. If all those nodes and edges map perfectly, boom, you get an LVS pass.
Section 4. DRC versus LVS.
This brings us to what is perhaps the most common VLSI interview topic you will ever encounter, the fundamental difference between DRC and LVS. If you're aiming for a career in layout or physical design, you absolutely must know this distinction inside and out. The crucial point here is that DRC is strictly looking at geometry and physical manufacturing rules. LVS, on the other hand, is exclusively checking for electrical equivalence and connectivity. Think of DRC, design rule check, as asking, is my layout physically legal to manufacture?
It searches for wires that are drawn too thin, or maybe a spacing error where two metals are placed too close together, which could cause a manufacturing defect at the foundry. LVS asks a completely different question. Is my layout electrically correct? Honestly, LVS doesn't care if a wire is ugly or completely inefficiently routed, as long as it successfully connects node A to node B without creating a short circuit to node C. A spacing error just violates a factory limit, but a short circuit, that fundamentally breaks the electrical intent of your chip. So here is the golden interview question. Can DRC pass, but LVS fail? If an interviewer throws this at you, you need to be ready with a confident and highly specific answer. It sounds a bit like a paradox, doesn't it? It's a classic trick question for beginners, but for us, it's a fantastic opportunity to show a really deep, intuitive understanding of the whole verification process.
The answer is absolutely 100% yes. You could easily accidentally connect two wires that were supposed to be completely separate. The geometry of that connection might be perfectly legal for manufacturing, but your electrical circuit is now completely ruined. Let me give you a highly specific example. Imagine you're carefully routing a piece of metal 1 to carry a super sensitive analog signal. While you're doing this, you accidentally drop a via 1 down to a substrate connection instead of the intended active region. Your metal width? Perfect. The via size? Perfect. The spacing? Perfect. DRC checks all that geometry and says, looks physically legal to me, pass. But the very second you run LVS, the extraction tool realizes you've just shorted your crucial signal straight to the substrate ground. The electrical intent is completely destroyed, and LVS will immediately fail, even with zero DRC errors.
Moving right along to Section 5, Common Failures.
Let's get into the trenches and examine what actually causes these failures during real analog layout work. Because understanding the theory is great, but knowing exactly what mistakes to look for on your screen is what makes you a true expert. These are the classic traps. A super common one is just a missing connection. You might have two metal layers perfectly overlapping each other on your screen, but if you simply forgot to drop a via between them, there is absolutely no electrical connection. That forms a fatal open circuit. Then we have parameter mismatches. This happens when you wire everything up perfectly, but say you drew a transistor with a gate width of 2 micrometers, while the schematic specifically called for 10 micrometers. The tool spots that physical size discrepancy instantly. But honestly, perhaps the most insidious trap in analog design is incorrect bulk or well connections. Why do these happen? Very often, an engineer might just forget to place a substrate tap entirely, leaving the body of the device floating. Or even worse, they might accidentally tie an N-well to ground instead of VDD. The transistor itself might be wired flawlessly, but because the bulk potential is completely wrong, the extracted connectivity will massively mismatch your schematic intent. Now consider this mind-bending fact. The physical layout can look drastically different from the schematic while still passing LVS perfectly. For example, a differential pair in an analog circuit might be implemented using a highly complex common centroid layout to ensure better analog performance and matching. LVS doesn't care that it looks visually different, it only cares that the extracted electrical network matches. This is a huge concept to grasp. In your schematic, a differential pair just looks like two simple transistor symbols drawn next to each other. But in the physical layout, to protect against thermal gradients and manufacturing variations, a good analog engineer will split those transistors into multiple fingers and interleave them in a cross-coupled checkerboard pattern. Visually, it looks like a complete maze compared to the clean schematic. But how does the tool figure this out? It uses concepts called device merging and the M factor, or multiplier. The extraction engine is actually smart enough to see 4 small physical transistors wired perfectly in parallel, mathematically merge them together, and recognize that they add up exactly to the 1 large transistor shown in the schematic. It's a real aha moment. Geometry can be manipulated endlessly as long as the math and the connectivity remain identical.
And finally, Section 6, LVS Debugging Technique. When that LVS report inevitably fails, and trust me it will, you need a systematic technique. Staring at a massive layout and randomly moving polygons around is just a recipe for disaster and wasted time. Never randomly edit your layout. Instead, rigorously follow the 6-step debugging mindset to trace the specific net mismatch right back to its physical source so you can fix it efficiently. Let's walk through this. First, check the summary. What exactly are you dealing with? Is it a short, an open, a parameter mismatch? Let's assume for a second it's an open net. Step 2 and 3 involve finding that specific broken net in the schematic and its counterpart in the layout. Modern EDA tools make this incredibly intuitive through a beautiful feature called cross-probing. When you click the broken net in your LVS error report, cross-probing will instantly highlight the exact wire in both your schematic viewer and your layout editor simultaneously.
Step 4 is where the magic happens. You trace that highlighted physical connection in the layout. Follow the metal path visually with your eyes. You will almost always find the exact microscopic spot where a via is missing or where a wire stops just 1 single nanometer short of a contact. Step 5, fix that specific root cause. And step 6, rerun LVS. This systematic approach transforms debugging from a total nightmare into a highly targeted operation. Comparing a passing report with a failing one shows exactly why mastering that 6-step technique is so essential. A failing report isn't just a red X. It explicitly lists things like missing device M3 or net mismatch on node out. It gives you the exact coordinates of the crime scene. By applying those 6 steps, you use the tool's failure report as a literal treasure map. Now, here is an insider tip that is going to save you days of frustration in your career. Always fix your shorts before you fix your opens, and fix your opens before your parameter mismatches. Why is this so crucial? Because a single short circuit can utterly confuse the extraction tool into reporting dozens, sometimes hundreds, of completely fake errors downstream. Fixing one major short often magically clears 50 other errors on your list instantly. You have to attack the hierarchy of failures systematically. To put everything into perspective for your entire layout flow, I want you to remember this holy trinity of physical design. DRC clears the physical rules, LVS clears the electrical intent, and PEX extracts the real-world parasitics. You absolutely cannot run a meaningful LVS until your layout is physically sound via DRC. And you cannot run a meaningful PEX, which is parasitic extraction, until LVS proves your circuit is electrically identical to the schematic. Think of it this way. LVS is somewhat idealistic. It assumes your physical wires are perfect, magical conductors with zero resistance. PEX is the harsh reality check. It calculates the tiny, unintended resistances and capacitances of your physical wires and vias that will inevitably drag down your circuit speed. It is a strict, logical progression from physical legality to electrical equivalence to physical reality. If you take away just one single thing from our explainer today, make it this fundamental distinction. DRC tells us whether the layout is physically legal, while LVS tells us whether the layout electrically matches the schematic. It perfectly encapsulates the dual nature of integrated circuit design. You are simultaneously acting as an architect, ensuring the building won't collapse, that's DRC, and an electrician, ensuring the wiring actually turns the lights on, that's LVS. So I'll leave you with this thought. If LVS passes with flying colors and guarantees electrical equivalence, does that actually mean your analog circuit will perform well in the real world? Well, LVS is just one vital milestone. It doesn't verify thermal noise, it doesn't verify device mismatch, and it certainly doesn't verify those pesky parasitics, which leaves us wondering, how exactly do we verify the true performance of our silicon once LVS is completely clean? Just because the pizza matched the order perfectly doesn't guarantee it actually tastes good, right? LVS confirms your pure electrical intent, but as we just touched on, physical wires have real resistance and adjacent metals create parasitic capacitance. A clean LVS is just setting the stage for parasitic extraction and those grueling, highly accurate post-layout simulations that tell you if your chip will actually survive in the real world. But how do we interpret those massive post-layout simulation files? Well, that is an explainer for another day. Keep learning, keep debugging systematically, and we will see you next time.